All right. All right. So you're going to do your spiel that you always do? Are you going to get it right this time?
Oofda. I only got it wrong once. You keep bringing it up every time.
Yeah. Well,
Caribou, fuel for life.
Well, I think I've... Anyway. Yeah, anyway. All right.
Yeah, it was once.
Yeah, once.
It was the first time.
Yeah. No, it wasn't the first time. Yeah, I brought kombucha on a youth trip once! One time! And you reminded me of it forever.
Good point.
You still remind me of it. Anyway.
You still drinking? Kombucha!
No.
It's good for you.
Yeah, it actually is.
It's good for you.
Uh-huh.
I know that. So,
anyway.
Here we are.
Yeah. All right.
Once again.
All right. So, I know we talked a lot about the characters that are our favorites, and I know we've talked about The Ring and et cetera, and we've also talked about friendship, which is such a wonderful theme. But I don't want to talk so much about themes today. I want to talk about specifically things from, like, scenes from each of the movies that are your favorites, are our favorites, and why. So, I don't know. Might as well start with The Fellowship of the Ring. What's some of your favorite scenes from that, would you say? Yeah. Do you have favorite scenes?
I have quite a few. I think first of all the scene of Gandalf coming into the Shire right at the beginning is so wonderful because the Shire is so just idyllic. Yeah. I mean, everything about it is so wonderful. And not to be annoying or whatever, but having been there, knowing certain things about the layout of Hobbiton, it's just really fun to be like, oh yeah, I remember, about that tree on top of Bilbo's Hobbit, whatever they call it.
The Hobbit hole.
The Hobbit hole. How, what was it, the leaves were all handcrafted in Taiwan or something and like attached individually to that tree.
To an actual tree though, or is the tree built?
The tree was taken from somewhere and placed there, and I don't know if it was dead, just like the trunk, or if it was fabricated, and then they attached all these silk, like thousands of silk leaves.
Wouldn't that job stink?
That would be a tough job. Or, I mean, the story that stuck with me from touring was how Peter Jackson and his crew, they're flying over in a helicopter, and I'm sure I've talked about this, but they're flying over this farm, the Jackson farm, where they have Hobbiton now. And they're like, ooh, wow, I think this has what we're looking for. It has the tree, because it was very important that it had certain rolling features, water, a tree.
Because is the tree important part of the story or something?
The party tree, it's where they all gather for these celebrations in the opening scenes. And they're like, they go to the door of the farmer's house, and they're like, excuse me, we're interested in using your land. We'd like to talk to you about buying some of it for set for a movie, And they're like, it's the Rugby World Cup. And they basically told Peter Jackson, take a hike, we're watching rugby.
You'll have to come back.
You'll have to come back later. And of course they stuck with it and did end up procuring that. But just funny,
Yeah.
So any shots of the Shire to me are like, not only bring back some cool memories, but are just so, I think we all have this idea of like an absolutely idyllic place. And it's pretty easy for the Shire to be that place.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one thing that's kind of interesting. Like, Frodo essentially goes on this quest to save the Shire. But we spend so little time in the Shire, too.
Yeah.
But, there's always that grounding of, like...
Right.
Oh. Yeah, I love the Shire, too.
Yeah. And then... I mean, the Shire... Yeah, there's so little time spent there, but there's always this idea that this is where I want to return, this is where my roots are, this is my happy place, whatever. Even like... as an adult, you'll find this more and more. You go wherever, all over the place, all over the country, all over the world, maybe. But there's something about walking through the door of where you grew up, or where or
just a place, that's
or just
special.
Driving into the county or the whatever.
Well,
or like, that connects you with your roots.
Or like, even for me, it's not. Well, I mean, we don't currently live where I grew up anymore, but it's like, for me, it's like. Driving out to camp, when I start driving down the road, it's like, okay, this is like a home place. Even though there's
certain feelings.
I only spent like 5 weeks out of my life there. It's still just like this, and not all at once. Like 1 week of summer, it's just like this. Oh my.
Right.
Like you leave. I don't know. It's just. I mean, it could just be
such profound things happen there. Such cool relationships are built there, and there are certain places, fields. Cabinet of Bad Medicine's not there anymore, but if I were to drive under that ground, even to see the lake, there's just certain feelings that are associated. So,
yeah,
I really like that. There's just, when he runs up to the wagon and hops right on from the little hillock thing that he's standing on. I mean, there's so many cool.
Ian McClellan acts so well too.
Yeah.
That's a huge thing that makes it so awesome. And then
what about for you?
I do like the Shire too. And I know I really I'm trying to think of like because I don't know, a lot of my favorite moments happen later in the trilogy too.
Mm-hmm.
I just really love the whole moment with when Elrond has the conversation with Gandalf about the strength of men failing and all that kind of stuff, and then how they set up. I mean, again, I just love that's the first time we see the moment where Elrond says, I took Isildur into the heart of Mount Doom and told him, basically cast into the fire, and I still think one of the most profound moments in any movie ever is when Isildur says no and then closes his hand around the ring. And I mean, forever they contrast that so well with this happens later in that same place, and Frodo makes the wrong choice just like Isildur did and only gives it up because Gollum bites his finger off. And then, but also contrasting it with at the end of the Fellowship when Aragorn hears the ring calling him and closes Frodo's hand around it and says, no, you take, the whole thing. And then I also love the Council of Elrond. I just like that part. I love anything with Rivendell. Rivendell is my favorite part.
Rivendell's another place like the Shire. It's so beautiful. It's so iconic. It's, anybody who is attached to beauty, I mean, these places are just amazing.
I think that's the part that your mom said that she closes her eyes and plugs her ears during the orc scene, but she loves the place where the elves live or something. I think she said something like that. But
that I believe, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think my mom said she loved, because our moms are similar in some ways, what they like. And my mom was like, I just loved the hobbits. They were like the hobbits themselves. She thought they were they are adorable.
Little cuties, yeah. So, I mean, there are many iconic scenes in that first movie. I love the conversation in the caves.
Oh, yes. That's another one of my favorites.
Between Gandalf and Frodo. How do you not love... I mean, when I think of Lord of the Rings, one of the absolutely pivotal, iconic moments is Gandalf and the Balrog. You shall not pass.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's just such a so many spiritual ramifications to that whole scene.
Yes.
That's powerful. Beautiful scene.
I know. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of it. Oh, I had something I wanted to say. I don't know what it was.
About the caves?
Oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. I think I was going to go back to the Council of Elrond. I think one of the funniest things is how the whole assembling of the Fellowship and you set up how these different characters or whatever, and I still think one of the funnier parts is where, first of all, where Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have already said, okay, we're going to go with you, and then Sam just pokes his head up and says, hey, Mr. Frodo's not going anywhere without me, and then Elrond said, of course, delivered beautifully by Hugo Weaving, just says, yes, it seems it's hardly impossible to separate you, even when he's summoned to a secret council and you are not. And just the way he uses his, he's mastered. I mean, you see that in pretty much every movie he's in. He's mastered, at least that I've seen him, and he's very good with his facial expressions.
Very good with his eyebrows.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, specifically with his eyebrows. And then when and then Merry and Pippin just don't they just pop out like in sync, and they're like, you need these people of intelligence of this sort of mission. Quest, and then
thing,
and then when Elrond says, well, then you shall be the Fellowship of the Ring, and then what is it? I think Pippin says, great, where are we going? It's only whatever. I can't keep those two actors straight.
We're in whatever this thing is. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of...
You have to love that kind of exuberance.
Yeah, I mean, that's not me. I'm more like, I need to know some stuff about it. I need to do some research and some careful planning.
We have some processing time and
yeah.
Make a pros and cons list. Yeah. That's what most of us are.
So. Well, that's not full on pros and cons, but I'm like, I need to process it, or I'll make a snap decision and then be like, oh shoot, then I'll spend weeks trying to process, like, if that was the right decision, but anywho. Yeah, but I also love, when you said the caves, were you talking specifically about the Balrog, or do you also love that whole...
No, the scene on the front end where they're talking about time and regret and, not judging. Even the very wise cannot see all ends, I mean, it's just it's a profound moment. Another profound moment, of course, is the death of Boromir.
Yeah.
And just, that whole... I would have followed you to the death.
Yeah.
My brother, my king.
My brother, my captain, my king.
My captain, yeah, that's powerful. Maybe it took death to really get the true grain of the wood out of Boromir.
Yeah.
But...
Well, I think they'd kind of said it. I think they had said one reason, and they cut a lot of this up for the theatrical, but you see more... Boromir had kind of, like, started to warm toward... The hobbits, absolutely, and then I think some of the other people too. Some, just not. And then this is the full on. And I mean, this is one scene where somebody I was watching was talking about, like, how the guys in Lord of the Rings are the opposite of opposite of toxic guys or whatever they have. It's non-toxic masculinity or whatever. And they were talking about, like, this is like just how I don't know. It's like, I don't know what it was. I don't know. It was good, but they were talking about how, how they can be physically affectionate with another guy, and it's not like, not an innuendo or something like that. I just love that.
Yeah.
Such a timeless, I don't know, it's just portrayed really well. I do love that part too.
Right. I mean, I think part of what people mean by toxic masculinity is like this chauvinism.
Yes.
And men, we're going to dominate and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a toxicity in masculinity too when it's maybe you have to call it something else, but when it's just weak, when men are just not courageous, when they won't lead, toxic, lack of masculinity, if you will. There's positive masculinity just like there's negative masculinity.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of the characters, whether it's Theoden, whether it's the Ranger, Aragorn himself, or whomever, there's a lot of that positive masculinity where not only is it courageous, but it's also tender. It's also loving. And what is the whole point of protecting Middle-earth against this great evil if it's not that you love life and love people and want to preserve something? And again, I see lots of parallels to what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, well,
preserving what needs to be preserved. There's some good in the world that's worth fighting for.
Well, I know what these guys I was watching summed up. They said they were talking about specifically about Aragorn, and they said you can decapitate orcs and write poetry. They're not two incompatible things.
Think about David.
Yeah,
David was the prototype for this. On the one hand, he's writing very, very like to the heart, cut you to the core kind of psalms in En Gedi as he hides from Saul. This is the dude that at 15 or 16, like, literally took a sword out and chopped off a dude's head. That is hardcore.
Yeah.
That is something we are not involved anymore in warfare that's that up close and personal. I mean, I know there's still, hand-to-hand combat and suicide bombers and, like, really up in your grill. But, the poet warrior, the warrior king, to hold those things inside of you simultaneously. So. Yeah. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. So I don't know do you have any other favorite scenes from Fellowship?
Fellowship? I don't know. I mean, I think, there's a lot from every movie, but I think, so you wanted to talk about favorite movies. Mine is The Two Towers, and I've said that right along, which is weird. For most people, they're going to be like your colleague, that's my least favorite. Oh, it's the one in the middle. The one in the middle is always the least favorite, right?
Yeah.
Middle child. So maybe it's the middle child in me that's like, no, that one's my favorite. But there are certain reasons for that.
Yeah.
There are many scenes that culminate in me loving that movie. The three that come to mind are the knocking down of all the stuff at Isengard by the Ents. love that. Just love the, you know what? We're gonna break this reservoir. Everything's gonna just come crashing down.
Mm-hmm. And doesn't all the trees get set on fire, and then he just goes right into the water and dips his head in?
Like a stalk of broccoli, just.
Yeah.
So yeah, you gotta love that little humor in there.
Yeah.
I love the
end. The main end. Treebeard, also voiced by John Rhys Davies, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go. Makes sense now that you say that. I love the moment where Gandalf comes down the hill with the Rohirrim, destroys the last of the Orc army or whatever, sends them to flight. That is such a beautiful moment. And then just the humor in the battle at Helm's Deep is fun.
Oh, you mean like the fight between Legolas and Gimli, the competition,
or Gimli being tossed over.
Yeah.
Don't touch me.
Don't tell the elf.
Yeah, I love that stuff. But then, of course, the conversation between Sam and Frodo, which we've talked over many times. That listen, you don't get into the folklore by living an easy life. You don't get to be the one that the stories are told about by never having to face adversity. You get there by persevering through adversity with grit, and you got to fight for the good. Because if you don't fight for the good, if you're not going to go down swinging, what the heck is going on? So
yeah. And then, did you say one? Or was I wrong? Did you say one of your favorites was also the exorcism or whatever you want to call it with Theoden?
Oh, yes, of course. Again, in the Two Towers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this movie is just packed with so much good stuff. They all are. I get that.
Yeah.
But the exorcism of Theoden, where Gandalf walks in, and I think everybody has wanted to do this at some point in their life, and he walks in and he's, just this feeble old guy in his gray cloak, and then he just...
Yeah.
Theoden King! And it's just, it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Such a, don't show it in church with 3-year-olds in the room, but...
Yeah. I still think it's such a good liner, how he's like, the courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late.
Yeah, and Wormtongue just being cast out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, that whole scene is so wonderful.
Yeah, and
Eowyn is just so wonderful.
I like her too. I'm just saying, I don't like her with Aragorn. That's all.
Anyway, don't need to get into that.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that right now. We'll get into that another time. So anyway,
let's not get into it ever.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I know I love that scene too, and then I think one of my favorite scenes is, I think it's pretty much right. Oh, not. It's one of the first scenes is the scene where Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are chasing. They flash between them running across, and then part of it's because I think that's one of my favorite sections of the score too. Is the music and.
It's a good section.
And then just whatever. And I still think I just watched that movie. I remember watching this with you guys the first time I watched it, and when Aragorn and Legolas are just running so smoothly, and this is so easy for them, and Gimli's 10 feet behind them, just going I keep breathing. That's the key. And I'm just I'm the dwarf. That's me.
He's walking, and they're sprinting, and then they pan out, and he's right behind them.
I think he's running, just not. Or how he falls, and they are so agile on their feet. And I mean, when I was watching this with my mom and dad, my mom's like, "Who can run like that all day? It's ridiculous." And I said, "A superhuman and an elf. That's who can run like that all day."
Yeah, and of course they're chasing these orcs, which are demonically possessed, whatever you want to say, to have all this stamina and stuff. But there's just so many cool moments in that movie. Even the Rohirrim riding up around them, and all the spears. There's the visual. The visual of that is so wow.
And then what is it like? And then
you would die before you saw.
Yeah, because Legolas, because Gimli says, "Tell me your name, Horsemaster, and I'll tell you mine." And then he's like, "What do you say? I would kill you. I would slice off your head if it was a few feet further from the ground." And that's when Legolas says, "You would die before your stroke fell."
Yeah.
And then...
So there's just a lot of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I love that whole exchange.
Yeah, I do too. And then, but yeah, and I also love the exorcism, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it.
That's what I call it. I mean, he's clearly possessed of the spirit of Wormtongue, who, is just, again, we've talked about it, he's so relatable.
Yeah.
There is so often a voice in our heads like that. Maybe not a physical person. Sometimes it could be. who just poisons and poisons, and they just fill us. It's just poison.
So yeah, I think one of the best parts too is, that scene is where, he looked so decrepit, and then just to see how he de-ages, and it's just so how you can physically change so often.
Right, and when the spirit is Saruman, because when it's cast out, Saruman goes flying across the room. I love that too. Just whatever Gandalf says, and then Saruman goes flying. It's just awesome,
Yeah, and
so
then I also love the whole like you said, that exchange between Sam and Frodo. Another scene that I love, I know, when I was talking to my boss, I said, yeah, I really like the Two Towers. She just said, actually, I think it's my least favorite. She said something about it being her least favorite, and I said, I really liked it because you get into the philosophy of Gollum, and he's such the mind of the psyche of Gollum, and he's such an interesting character.
Personality, yeah.
And she said, well, he's my least favorite, so I'm okay with him not being on screen or whatever. And I said, I really liked, I think one of the greatest scenes is where he's actually, it's where we see the split personality come out in its full glory, and he's arguing with himself, and he actually says, no, that's in the third movie.
That's in the third one.
In the second one, he's it's just they switch the camera angles back and forth, and I think I heard somewhere that was Andy Serkis actually is just really good at changing his voice really quick, so that was just one take. So they were just like, okay, camera A, okay, you're Smeagol. Okay, you're Gollum now. Smeagol, Gollum. And it's so interesting how he actually says he tries to change so hard because he tells his other personality to go away, and he's like, no, Master is our friend. Master is our friend. And the next morning, you can actually see there's something different about him. He's a lot more. Smeagol is nicer, and then when he thinks Frodo, because it has lied to him, then Gollum comes back, and that's when he changes into this just evil,
the hideous creature he's become.
But it's so interesting to see how I still think one of the more powerful moments, and I know you and I have disagreed a little bit about, or not fully disagreed, we just perceived it different ways, about Frodo and Sam's different responses to him. And when Frodo says, Smeagol, wasn't that your name? He hadn't been called Smeagol in, centuries probably, and it's just interesting to see how that's what leads him to try to change. How often obviously it's not successful, but how often do we have, if we have a good side or a good qualities and someone calls it out, how often does that change our perspective of that person, our perspective in life? And sometimes it can have a better effect than it does with Gollum because we're not possessed by a demon or whatever. And so I just think that's one of the more powerful scenes, and I was thinking go away and never come back. But again, he was doing it in his own power. He didn't, but then you see, again, the opposite, which is kind of contrasted with Theoden, who, when Gandalf, who is sort of a Christ figure, casts it out, it never comes back. It leaves him forever. And
I think Gandalf's response to Wormtongue is the same as Sam's response to Gollum. They just recognize evil. The evil has to be dealt with. The sin has to be dealt with. Is there something redeemable about Gollum? It's like he wants there to be. The Smeagol thing is in there somewhere, but it's subject. It's subject to, Smeagol is subject to Gollum, and it's like Sam recognizes that. Frodo wants to believe so desperately, and we've all had relationships like this. With people, we want to believe that the person in there, is gonna triumph, but it ain't gonna happen without God. It's not gonna happen without the intervention of the Holy Spirit. And you see that, a perfect example of the difference. Theoden is set free forever. Gollum has an experience where the spirit goes off into dry places and comes back sevenfold because there's nothing that filled him. He's just trying to do it in his own strength, and he ends up eventually dying because he's corrupted. He's beyond.
He's evil beyond repair.
He can't. In his own power, he can't get back to a place of living morally, or whatever you want to say.
I don't know what, but I just think that's such a. And then I know you, like I said, I also love the exchange between, you know, like there's some good in this world. But in another one of my, and then I think it's just changed shortly after this, where they're walking. I think they left wherever they're fighting. Where is that supposed to be?
Osgiliath?
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I know it. It's just I didn't. It's not central. It's not in the front of my brain. It doesn't. I can't always remember it. But and Sam's. I think he's just trying to encourage Frodo, and he's like, I wonder when wonder if they'll tell stories about us, Mr. Frodo. Someday they'll say, I want to hear about Frodo in the ring, and then Frodo just says, well, they're forgetting somebody, Samwise the Brave. Mm-hmm. Frodo wouldn't have gotten far without Sam. Mm-hmm. And then Sam thinks he's joking, but then he's like, no, I wouldn't have gotten far without you, and I just think that's such a, a lovely...
Yeah, it is lovely. Which segues well into the third movie, which I honestly think is my least favorite, which is so weird to say, because you're programmed in life to, like, but... think about The Last Battle. Ties up all the loose ends, but it's probably your least favorite book of the series. Maybe not.
Yeah, it is.
But it's the hardest to love, somehow.
The Last Battle?
It's so much of it is so negative. It's so, everything's falling apart, breaking at the seams, which is what we see in the book of Revelation. But to me, I don't know. I love all three, but
they're all so
for me,
good.
That's the least gripping. And I don't, whatever. It ties up the stuff. It resolves the conflict. Those parts I love, but just call it great movie making or whatever.
Yeah.
On Peter Jackson's part, that he could make a trilogy, and the third one isn't my favorite because they're all so good.
Well, that's the thing. Like, that's why it's like, well, it's hard for me to pick a favorite, but they're all
it's not even necessary.
None of them are. Well, I heard someone ranking them. He said from the least best to the best.
Yeah.
So they're all equally wonderful.
Right. So
in a lot of ways.
Go 2, 1, 3.
Yeah.
But okay, third movie. How would it be for you?
I think I'd have to say
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. That's what it is. 3, 2, 1. It's just kind of funny. Or like I go back and forth, whether it's 3, 2, 1 or 2, 3, 1.
Sure.
Because for me, it's like, well, when you're trying to think of favorite scenes, I have a lot more favorite scenes in the second and the third one than in the first one.
Yeah.
So it's like 3, 2, 2, 3, and then 1, like right here. So they're all wonderful. It's just
the least best. Yeah. So
the least best, but
so from the Return of the King, what scene or two really are like, oh yes.
For me.
Yeah.
Well, I love. Well, I love the whole. I know was another thing we argue about was the merits of Arwen's decision or whatever. If it was but I love the whole. This is where I think she actually shows some strength in her character, where she comes back and says, "No, Dad, I'm not gonna go. I don't care what you tell me to do." Mm-hmm. And you need to reforge the sword. Doesn't she basically tell him, like, you need, or basically says, you really need to do this, and he finally, out of love for her, and I think there's got to be some level of love for Aragorn in that situation, because, again, this is his son that he had raised. Well, he had raised this kid, and I don't know how much interaction they'd had over from the time Aragorn was an adult, but, the reforging of the sword, and then the whole put aside the ranger, become who you were born to be. I think that scene, that's another one that's some of the best cinematography or whatever. This is one thing I think is so interesting about this scene too. This is the only one where they actually, sometimes if there's movies with these, really, doesn't matter, guy or girl, these really beautiful people, they'll accentuate, oh, look at this person's figure or whatever. This is the only scene where I actually, you always tease me when I deserve to be teased about it, is, oh my goodness, Aragorn's just so good looking. I never am I like his face or whatever. I think his face is so good looking. I'm never oh yeah, he's got this part of it too. But that's the only scene where I'm oh yeah, the guy has pecs or whatever, because of the shot that they take. But I know I love the cinematography, and then the music, and cinematography is the shooting.
It's the way they film it.
And then I just love that line. I love that whole line where it's put aside the ranger, become who you were born to be. I just think that is such a powerful statement, because it's again, we talked about last time, how often do you need people in your life to say, okay, sometimes there's a level of you need to slap someone in the face and say, stop being stupid, But this one, I don't see that in that way. It's like, I love you so much. Come on, what's wrong with you? You know you can do this. Or, no, what may not's wrong, what's wrong with you? It's like, I get it, you have a lot of doubts, but you can do this. And then again, I love this. That's just like, that's his moment, where after that, you don't see that whole...
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he ever hides his face for the rest of the movie. I could be wrong. But he's like, and then again, he says later, like in the very next scene, he says, I am Isildur's heir. Mm-hmm. And that's such a powerful moment. My parents didn't get it when I was watching it with them. Like, this is so powerful. He's never admitted it before. I mean, you think about how we're like 7 hours into this 9-hour saga, and that's the first time he ever admits. I mean, he's told, you're Isildur's heir, but he never admits it.
Watching the series umpteen times, I never, until you really shine the light on that scene, we're just kind of obsessive about that scene, right? I had never really gone, wow, that is a strong scene. I mean, I like that kind of phraseology, the way that's written is really, it's well done. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, this is a theme in film, right? Like, I think of Luke Skywalker, and I don't know how much you've ever gotten into Star Wars, but
no.
Again, there's a point where he has to step into the destiny. You are actually the Jedi. You're the guy. And honestly, this even happens in the life of Jesus, I would say. Mm-hmm. When he comes to the wedding in Cana, his mom's phrase is not, put aside the carpenter, become who you were born to be. His mom's line is, do whatever he tells you. She just is the one who's like, she's the Elrond in the tent, who's like, listen, I know who you are. Before you were born. Okay. Yeah. Too. Which is so weird. Like, my son is actually thousands of years older than me.
Infinitively older than me.
Yeah, right. Exactly. He is infinitely older than me. That whole dynamic Mary must have had moments that just blew her mind all the time.
Well, I don't think I've always. Well, we can not.
But anyway, she knows who he is. Mm-hmm. He knows who he is. Nobody else really knows who he is. Even his siblings are like, they're totally unclear until his resurrection about who he is. But he steps into that room, and she's like, he says, my time has not yet come, and she's like, do whatever he tells you. Yeah. She just knows it's time to go. It's time to go.
Yeah.
I can't wait anymore.
Well, she was
she was prods him a little.
Yeah, she just seemed to, I think you've talked about how she was such a reflective, contemplative person. It's just her, you talked about how sometimes women are in touch with the spirit, and of course, Jesus was God, but
yeah,
still.
Not more than Jesus, but still, there's a timing thing, and she's like, let's do it. Oh, let's get into this, because, man, if you're the savior of the world, I've watched you, she had to have, for her and Joseph, we don't know what happens to Joseph, but for them, who know who Jesus is, apparently only his parents and the 3 kings knew who he was, or whatever.
Yeah,
and the shepherds. And who knows what becomes of the shepherds, but for 30 years, can you imagine this?
Yeah.
For 30 years, you're like, okay, when are we going to go? When are we? You're the Messiah, right? When is this going to start? When are we? I can't imagine how antsy she must have been getting.
Yeah.
Like, my time has not yet come. What are you talking about, man? You're 30.
Yeah.
Like.
What kind of? I know you made the comment when we were watching the scene where Arwen is going to leave. And there she's riding with the elves, and you said, doesn't she look like Mary, the mother of Jesus, or something? Because with her hood and like her, pristine skin or whatever, she looks like paintings of Mary.
Right.
And
just perfect, virginal.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Well, she's an elf. That's how she's supposed to look. But anyway. So you kind of see that, like how Arwen is also the one who calls out, like, who believes in him. She's like they have that whole scene. That's another thing I've seen for Fellowship that I actually really like too, is how she's like, why do you fear the past? You're Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself, and encourages him and does what does the good wife thing, even though they're not married yet, about the whole like, no, when the husband's discouraged, like, no,
prod him,
and I think, I don't know. Yeah. There's a lot of things. I mean, I know you think that she's just this wuss, but I don't think she is.
No, I mean, there's the one scene I love with her is where she takes Frodo to to Rivendell, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that where they go?
Yeah.
When he's been stabbed, and she calls the water.
Yeah, if you want him, come and claim him.
Yeah, I mean, now to me, that's her moment of Eowyn, which is one of my favorite scenes in the third movie. I am no man. Actually, that's kind of her.
I have mixed feelings
her
about
time
that scene,
to shine.
Yeah.
I love that about Arwen. There she shows. There it is. Some grit. Some real.
I think
tenacity. And
I mean, I love it. I think she has it. She just doesn't have. It doesn't show itself in the same way.
She's portrayed as this fine-boned China doll, and to me, again, just like with Frodo, just like with many others, the way they're portrayed has a lot to do on film. Has a lot to do with how I feel about them as characters from a book series, which.
Yeah.
Had I really read and studied the books beforehand, I probably would have had a lot of conflict about how they're portrayed on film, because you might say, wait a minute, I didn't think of her as this, this kind of person. I thought of her as this.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And then, I don't know. I was trying to think of some other scenes that I really love. And then, I also love, I know, I hate when my brain doesn't, as your son says, my brain always fails me at times like these.
Yeah. Yeah, Jonas?
Yes.
We've talked about and we don't need to rehash these necessarily, but we've talked about the scene where Sam picks Frodo up and carries him. We've talked about the final, ultimate moments back in Mount Doom.
Yeah, I know. Also, the only
where again Gollum comes back to save the day in his own weird way. And
I know another scene. This is I've not actually seen the extended editions, but I've seen clips of them. There's one where, how the whole part where Aragorn rides up to where the crew rides up to the Black Gates, and Aragorn says, "Let the Lord of the Black Land come forth." And again, that's another reason I love that, because it just shows how much Aragorn's character has grown from, he doesn't, I don't know how much he doesn't do that kind of stuff. Like in the first movie, he's very more soft spoken, even though you can kind of get sense this lion
quiet strength.
Yes. And then there's a whole scene that they cut out, their whole little moment where they cut out where this the mouth of Sauron comes out or whatever. It's because Sauron is just an eye above Mount Doom or whatever, and he comes out and he's just he basically tells them Frodo is dead, and they have the mithril shirt because the orcs took it from him when they had captured him. And then and then I think Aragorn is just kind of, I don't know, he just kind of gives people call it is, I'm done with everybody's crap look or whatever, because he does have that look or whatever, and he kind of goes over and then the thing, I guess we'll call it, says, "Who is this? Isildur's heir. It takes more to make a king than a broken elvish blade." And then Aragorn takes the sword and then just slices the thing's head off. And again, you see that so much. No, I'm not going to listen. I've listened to the lies. I've listened to the whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not going to deal with the same. Not going to listen to that garbage anymore. And then again, then they go right into his speech about, which we talked about last time, and then also, of course, for Frodo. I love that line, too. And then, again, I know you're talking about the climactic moment at Mount Doom. That was the one scene, again, my parents just didn't get into Lord of the Rings, which is fine, nobody has to. And not everybody has to, but she's that's the one scene where she was getting really caught up, throw it in, come on, just throw it in! And I mean, that was one part where I did not know how it was going to end at Mount Doom, but I was not expecting that part of it too. Partly because I was already reading about it online or stuff. I was already reading stuff people were saying about Lord of the Rings before I had seen the third movie, and I got to stuff about the third movie, I'm like, must avoid, don't spoil! Don't spoil, I don't want to know anything.
Well,
so,
I mean, you
at
least could watch them back to back when they came out. We had to wait a year.
Yeah.
A year.
Oh my.
Christmas 3 years in a row. It was 2000 what? 1, 2, and 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
I feel so sorry for you.
That's why after the second movie, I'm like, that's it. I'm reading it. So I read the book, and and then of course the book covers way more than the movie could, but it was It was too much. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait.
But yeah, I love that part of. But yeah, I mean, I love that whole exchange too.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I feel like like my mom had asked me one time about, well, could any of these movies stand alone? I'm like, yeah, no, you need the whole story. And I mean, that's another thing too about why I don't feel it's completely necessary to pick a favorite because. Right. Well, like on my favorite movies list, I just have The Lord of the Rings and then these other movies because I think of them as one continuous story. But again, it's so fun to contrast, the character difference and again like how you see at Eric, you talk about how they tie up the loose ends and stuff, and people talk about how it has too many endings. I don't think of it that way because to me it kind of does, but they're all. I don't know what ending you could cut out really. But, I mean, of course, you have Aragorn's coronation, which is, again, I just love that whole thing. And even how, again, you see how, even when he's just saved all of Middle-earth, I mean, done a huge part of saving all of Middle-earth, he's become the king, he's earned his throne. It's not like it was just handed to him. Mm-hmm. And he still says, this day doesn't belong to one man, but to all. So it goes back to, how humble he is. And, again, that's what makes him such a wonderful character.
Yeah, his humility. I think of all the qualities of any of the characters in the movies, I love Sam's grit and I love Aragorn's humility. Mm-hmm. Humility is so. Yeah, you talk about how sexy the man is.
Hey, I don't say that word.
Humility is so sexy. Whatever you want to call it.
I do not say that word.
Humility is so attractive.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
When you see that that is, I think, the most attractive quality in a human being.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
And because humility flavors all the other attractive qualities, I think. To forgive somebody, what does it require? Humility. To sacrifice for somebody, it requires humility. To stand up and be courageous even requires humility because it has to. You can't be courageous unless there's something greater that you are fighting for, or someone greater that you're fighting for than your own fear. And so, I mean, that's what I love about him. I mean, every time I encounter it in people in real life, I'm like, wow, that is just so beautiful. A person that's not thinking only about themselves 24/7, that's incredible.
Well, I mean, that's true. It's like, that's one thing that I think, I don't know, that why people latch on to Aragorn and Sam is, I mean, they don't have magical powers or anything like that. They're not whatever. They have, traits that you can replicate. You could say, a guy could say, I'm going to try to be a guy more like Aragorn. I'm going to try to love, my wife, or I'm going to try to treat women the way he does or whatever. It's you could actually, try to replicate those characteristics or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I love when I talk about how attractive he is, I mean, it isn't just his physical features, it's his personality, it's his character qualities that and again, his humility that I absolutely love too. One thing that's interesting too, you're talking about humility and how there can be you can be so proud about how humble you are too. Let's just be real. I suppose, yeah. I am such a humble person. Thank God that I'm not proud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the Pharisee.
Yeah.
Thank God that I'm not like this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but they do such a good job in writing how well. I don't know if we thank Tolkien or Peter Jackson for how well he portrays the characters, but.
No, we thank Tolkien for the genius.
Writing characters.
And we thank Peter Jackson for not wrecking such brilliant
his respect.
Books, for doing such a good job, for casting so well, for taking so much care with it. That requires a lot of love in its own way. So,
too bad he didn't do that with The Hobbit too.
Yeah, you could tell there was producers behind him going draw this out, make as much money for us as you can. And if they were going to do that, they should have done that with Return of the King. Make that into 2 movies. Make The Hobbit in one shot. You don't need all the extra outside of the book stuff that they jammed in there.
And I mean, I think there was some stuff that he changed for the movies for good reason. I think actually that whole scene where, the one scene you like about with Arwen, I think that was actually some other elf that came out and took them, but they were no, let's make that Arwen to give her more of a presence in the books and make her establish her as a character beyond like this pretty thing.
Mm-hmm. And I like that the elves show up to help at Helm's Deep, even though they don't in the books.
Yeah.
You know, they just.
And purists don't like that, of course, but I think it's fine.
Purists don't like that. I remember my friend Micah being just ticked off that that's not how it happened. Well, sometimes you make executive decisions.
So how did they actually win in the book?
That I don't know.
Because
I really had to read all the books at some point.
Well, I mean, so, I'm sure Gandalf showed up.
We can't be considered mega fans if we haven't read and studied the books, I suppose.
Well, man, we're mega fans of the movies. We love the movies. We're not mega fans. We love the movies.
But.
Well, I know. I was just talking to somebody who was, my future roommates at college who were like, two of us were like, yeah, we love the movies. We've never read the books. And one of them was like, well, if you're going to call, you need to read the books for me. Will you read the books for me, please? They're really good.
They know you're a mega geek of Lord of the Rings, though?
I think I told them. I know I told one of them. I can't remember if I told the other. But they were like, but yeah, they were still like, oh, you got to read the books at least once. The movies are great because they give you a visual.
Mega geek. That's a term of endearment in this kind of field of
exploration. I know. I literally just saw
exploration.
I literally just saw a meme that said it was like, where they're camped right outside the Paths of the Dead, like it's the scene before, and it was using the thing where Gimli's like, what's that down there? And what's his Éomer? Is that Éowyn's brother?
Éomer, yeah.
Éomer says. There's so many characters that just you get kind of lost sometimes. And Éomer
says, an awesome character too.
Yeah, I like him too.
Small part.
Éomer says, "Oh, that's in the in the movies, in the actual thing." He said, "Oh, that's the Paths of the Dead. Few that venture down there return." And then they had plugged that and they covered up Paths of the Dead with the, "Oh, that's the Lord of the Rings fandom. Few that enter down that path return."
That's true.
So once you get down that road, you don't go back.
Very true. Most of us don't get to the level of Micah Dobler or Dave Barnes, what was his name?
Yeah, Dave Barnes or Dave
Bates. Barnes? Yeah.
I can't remember his last name. Anyway.
Who are like,
Silmarillion reading fans.
Off the deep end completely, but my hat is off to you, gentlemen.
Anyway.
But anyway,
yeah,
we better wrap it up.
Yeah, I don't know.
We gotta visit the Tinkletorium.
Oh, for crying out loud!
Wanted to make sure we got that in the video, so don't even think about editing it out.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Anyway, all right. Awesome.
Very good.
Yeah. All right.